Now we open. I will be out of here before I can actually present. So.
This is what you get from
All right. Welcome to the GROW meeting, Global Routing Operations Working Group at IETF 123 in Madrid, Spain. If you do not intend to be in Spain, come see me after this meeting and I'll try and help you get home. But next slide, please. First of all, our note well. We are at the IETF, and the goal of IETF is to help create interoperable standards that help the internet. We will treat each other with respect, so that means no ad hominem or other fallacy arguments when debating things, but debate is good. Debate helps us understand problem spaces better and exchange knowledge and arrive at solutions that work well for many people. Next slide, please. We have a few resources. We have a mailing list. It's not too much traffic. It's a few messages a week. So if you're interested in global routing operations, please subscribe to our mailing list. You can chat in our Zulip chat room, which I will join myself so I can. All right. And if you want to understand what the goal of the GROW working group is, please read up on our charter. Next slide, please. So we have a few things to go through today. First of all, there are QR codes hanging off the microphones. Scan those with your phone and then log in with your data tracker account. And this helps us with planning the capacity for the next meeting, like how many people are we expecting. So that's the purpose of the blue sheets. Then we need a volunteer who will take minutes. Minute taking means you summarize what the presenter or people in the audience are asking in a form that we can later quickly sort of find what we were doing this particular meeting. And we have a volunteer. Like, this is great. Usually I have to forcefully appoint a volunteer, which is not strictly speaking then volunteering, but this time we got lucky. Jabber scribe, I guess, is a old terminology. It should maybe be Zulip scribe. I'll keep an eye on the chat room myself. We have the topic of grow leadership changes, late IPR disclosures, and then we'll go to the actual agenda. Next slide, please. Leadership change. I'm super happy that Paulo has offered his services to help co-chair the Grow Working Group. Paulo joined. Christopher Morrow departed. I think Christopher Morrow was co-chair for maybe 16 or 17 years. A million years, yeah. So yeah, I think it was 6-7 years ago that Christopher Morrow taught me the ropes on how to be an IETF working group chair, and you can see that the result of that education attempt was awful. Yeah, I'm kidding. But I'm very excited to continue this work with Paulo. I don't think Chris is with us in the room, either physically or spiritually. So at the next IETF where he is present, we'll put him on the stage and clap and give him a small token of appreciation for his services. But yeah, in the meantime, it's me and Paulo. We also have a secretary. Where is our secretary? Can you stand up? Lan Chen is will be helping us. So yeah, you'll see messages going forward. You'll see messages from Lan Chen, Paulo, or myself in relationship to proceedings in this working group. Next slide, please.
And we should not forget that we have also Jeff as a technical advisor.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah. Any technical questions about printers or Wi-Fi not working? Yeah. All right. Late IPR disclosures. And this is where I'm going to give you guys a stern talking to. It is, of course, beautiful that people can produce ideas and register innovations in centralized registries and communicate with the world like, I invented something. I support that. The IETF does not take any position on the validity of such claims in relationship to intellectual property rights, but the IETF does have a mechanism where you can disclose that you know of a patent in relationship to an internet draft or RFC. Super useful mechanism that you as rights holder have a means to inform the IETF community of patents. However, a little bit of friction arises when IPR disclosures are made late in the process. So in this instance, a patent that apparently was filed a few years ago was uncovered, so to speak, during working group last call, which means that people that expressed the position on whether a document should progress or not progress to publication received new information after they took position. So sort of the wrong order of things starts happening. And because of the late disclosure, I had to seek counsel of the IETF LLC legal team to understand whether there are any ramifications or not, and discuss this with my area director. Long story short, had this IPR disclosure been made a few weeks earlier or a few months earlier, it would have saved maybe 2 months of back and forth in back channels in relationship to the disclosure. And it's causing me more work if you guys are late with your IPR disclosures. So to make this more efficient and to reduce the workload on my side, I would really, really appreciate it if you see internet drafts be adopted by the working group, or write internet drafts yourself, or read one at some point in time, and you know of IPR, please use the tooling that is provided by the IETF to disclose the IPR, and try and avoid waiting until the last moment before you disclose. Are there questions or comments about what I just said? All right, so what is it we learned? IPR disclosures as early as possible. Thank you. Then our agenda. We're 5 minutes over time, but I think we have a slot that will last 2 days, so we should be good. We have a fairly packed agenda. There's about 8 presentations, or 9, one of the two. And I would like to invite Arturo to present on the peering API. Arturo?
It looks like I have 5 minutes. Gonna be quick.
Is that true?
I think so. I don't know. I saw 10 and then 15. So
Let me double check.
there is anyway. There is like a lot.
No, you have 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But I'm slightly confused why this. I think. Make sure to speak into the microphone. That's the preview of the slides.
Perfect.
You can use this clicker, I think. Maybe it's not working. You can use your phone. If you use the on-site data tracker tool, it should give you.
You can assign the clicker from the objective, assign it to the
All right. We're going to figure out the clicker. Until then, you can tell Paulo.
Okay.
Next slide.
Okay. Well, my name is Arturo Servina. I'm one of the authors of this draft that is talking about how we automate a peering API, or how we automate peering using an API. We are like 6 authors right now, different companies. Normally, well, all of us, they are interested in like make it peering more scalable, because we have like a lot. So we go to the next one. So maybe the next one. So peering in the past, it was a slow coordination. You will go to a conference, they will say, yeah, we want to peer with you. There will be an engineer that will configure the router, and that was in the past. But today, we have to add more peering capacity, like almost every day. For example, in our last request, I think like for the next 3 months, we have to add like 300 or something like peering connections. Like it's kind of hard to do it manually. So we decided to start working in something that is more automated. When 2 companies, they know that they want to peer, it's like we can just do the automation. So we are starting with this peering API. We go to the next one. Next slide. Okay, this is basically what is the draft about. The goal is to provide a peering API. Right now is a public peering, so basically in an internet exchange point where the only thing that you have to do is like create a bilateral BGP session, like configure some filters. We are planning to do a private peering API, but that will be like another document, because that is more complicated. You have to like see who is going to pay for the cross connection, send a LOA, do the cross connection, who is going to provide the IP. So it's a little bit more complicated. So we decided to move it to another draft. So basically, what we do is like we manage how to request new bilaterals. You can also list with the API the connections, and also you can remove some of the connections. One of the big topics that it has been coming to this draft is how do you authenticate your other party? So the first idea that we have, like, because this basically born using PeeringDB as a database for peering information, and also like who are the people that is allowed to talk in behalf of an ASN. So basically the first thing that we did is like, hey, let's use PeeringDB using OAuth. after the discussion that we have in this group, is like, oh well, probably we need something a little bit more robust. So we start like talking about to use RPKI. So one of the things that we are doing, or we change in the draft, that I'm going to talk a little bit, just a little bit, because I don't know. But fortunately, I have one of my co-authors here, so they can speak a little bit more about like what is this about, because I don't know about much about OAuth and how to use RPKI for that. So we go to the next one. So these are the changes since the last ITF. Well, in the last ITF, we request for working group adoption. It was adopted, so now it's an adopted working group item. We changed the API flow. That is basically the explanation of how we did it. So we removed the authentication part of it because it was like embedded there. Perfect. It's just two small slides. So basically we have change the API flow, so like it's a little bit more clear, and also the complicated part of the authentication, we move it out of that on its own section. Also, we added a section about API discovery. How do we discover the endpoints of the other side who is doing this? Basically, we put it that is manual. We didn't do like a rocket science. So this is one of the things that probably is still open, and we need your feedback. Is that good enough, or do we need something a little bit more complicated, or maybe more like robust in some way? And also we add like a very good section about authentication with varied tokens. One using RPKI, which is the one that we recommend, and the other that is the using PDNDB, that is the one that we supported with the running code that we have today. With the RPKI and OAuth, we decided that it was kind of complicated for this draft, so we move it to another draft that Q is writing. So basically, we move it there and say, hey, go to look at that draft, and then that's the authentication that we are supporting. So we think that is a good compromise, not to add to complexity to this draft. That is, I will say that without like the discovering API and maybe some details in the authentication is basically cook, unless like you think that is otherwise. So that's why we move it away. So the authentication, so we can work in another document and make it robust there. Also because it's more about authentication and not about API for peering. So that's basically that. And basically we need to make a decision that the two methods of authentication that we have there are good enough. Is that good enough for this group? And also like what we do with the AP discovery is good enough, like what we have now, that is basically do it manually, maybe offline. And also you are like interested on testing this, there is this URL that is working with a Meta with this running code. This is the server. We are working in a client, so we probably will. I think it's going to be relatively quick. It's going to be ready relatively quick, but you want to test it, and that's basically that. I don't know if any questions.
Jeff has partial advertisement for talk I'm giving at routing area, but overlapping your OAuth. OAuth is a nice idea for your authentication. What we're talking about in RTG area is that for BGP peering or other things that want to use TLS as a mechanism for routing, certificate infrastructure that is AS anchored. So an AS certificate that allows you to identify that you're an appropriate client that you can exchange out of band. Maybe a different way they do this in OAuth.
Yeah. Do you have any comment, Q, or?
Okay, so the OAuth is entirely my bit. I apologize for the state the draft is currently in. I finished it 2 days before the deadline, and it was just getting all of my notes into ID form so I could put something up. The way it works is more the using an RPKI signed message, which is the hopefully new form of an RPKI signed checklist to say that this OAuth IDP is authoritative for this AS. Because the problem that was raised was that having to have the OAuth server have access to the RPKI CA constantly is a problem in big enterprises. So we created a bit of a indirect binding. but I will look at the TLS with RPKI stuff because that may provide some useful insight into how we can do things.
Yeah, and sorry I couldn't answer that because I'm a pinning person, not an outlet. So that's why it's good to have a co-author here. So
Tobias Siewich, Max Planck Institute for Informatics. And I was wondering about the running code part, because if you access the URI on the slides, you're redirected to developer.facebook.com, and it looks more like a landing page. So
okay, I'll check with the meta
and
team.
in general, what would be really cool and appreciated would be like some curl statements or something.
Yeah,
for
it's
basic-
supposed like you should be able to do that. I don't know
Oh,
what
no, no,
happened
no,
with
no,
that.
no, no, not only being able to do that, but having like an appendix in the draft while it's in draft stage that actually lists like the different curl commands you would
Okay.
do to manually interact with the peering API would be cool.
Okay, okay.
Can I quickly comment on the question? I wasn't involved in that particular web page. Oh,
Closer to the mic.
oh, yeah.
Did you
Yang-
join the queue first?
Just answering the question.
Uh,
Yeah, Yang Yu from Meta. That
Okay.
particular endpoint is working, but you need to specify the actual endpoint, like /sessions. Then you will, like, I wasn't involved in the original design, so I'm not sure why. Like, if you just enter that URL, it sends a redirect. I guess like that's something that probably could be done in a different way.
Mike.
Thanks. Hi, Mike Blanche. Full disclosure, I'm a former colleague of Arturo's, but I'm a big fan of this API. On authentication, I comment, the current practice is most often to establish peering using email. So somebody sends somebody else an email and then the BGP session gets set up. So anything that is more secure than sending someone an email is an improvement. And I'm pleased to see there are two options here. There's the OAuth with RPKI, then there's also peering DB, which is the de facto industry standard for doing this. The thousands of networks have access to peering DB, and it's not perfect, and it is a third-party database, but it's the easiest way of getting wide adoption of this. And on your other point, Arturo, on discovery, I'd leave that for a separate draft.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arturo. I'm super excited with the progress your team is making. I'm very excited. Q is helping out with RPKI stuff. So I'm seeing a lot of progress, and yeah, we will continue working on it.
And if you have comments, send it to the list, and we will
Yeah.
can discuss it there. That is like broader audience. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up, may I invite Prasad Narasimha? Is that okay? Anna? Thank you. Oh, in that case, we'll go to Tobias first and figure out your slides. My apologies. Tobias. The slides.
Can you do me a favor, please?
And you can use the
Yeah, can you do me a favor, please?
Yep.
Could you please remove me from the queue?
Yes.
Awesome. We've come together again, like it's tradition for every session of GROW, to talk about draft IETF GROW BGP OPSEC update and the associated two other drafts, the operational security and formal considerations, and the terms draft. And I'm doing this together with Nick Elliott for the main draft and Wolfgang Tremmel for the terms draft. So, process question first. Go through all three things, then do questions. Would suggest that, if that's fine with the chairs.
I do one thing, questions, one thing, questions.
Well, my proposal is do all three things and then do the questions.
If you think that's better, then yeah.
Then we do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's start with the GROW OPSEC update. So we had this original plan, which you probably have seen like a lot of times by now, with the main goal being be quick before things become laws. We might have room for improvement on that point. But beyond that, this was initially a list of all the things you could do to secure BGP. Then Nick figured out that that might actually not be that timeless and not that policy-wise, and especially not that likely to be read by policymakers. So we made it shorter. It ended up being a relatively concise 4.5 page document. There was some feedback after 1.2.2, some minor formulation changes. The ED, like eternal documents, that was something we discussed over the last two meetings. Concept was removed. And first, I would like to have a little show of hands. Who read this document? That is 3 people. 3.5. I'm counting Luke as a half. Okay, so the next question, what is missing for working group last call, is a little bit difficult. And I would like to encourage all of you to deeply think about reading this document. It's only 4.5 pages. It is like the minimum viable draft for having a BGP security policy. Like, I can't make less text. So, big question, what is next? Well, for now, what we had cut out. So we had a lot of very specific implementation instructions in the original OPSEC update. We took all of that out and created a new informational draft, which should summarize available techniques to accomplish what the policy is saying. Not making it a BCP to have a shorter turnaround time to actually make changes when they're sensible or necessary. Not making it a BCP to not have disagreements about what should or should not be included, or what technique that might not be considered should maybe be taken out, whatever, like easier consensus finding. And also keeping updating this document in the working group continuously. So idea is basically list options, potentially multiple to do the same thing. For example, you can use the OTC attribute, or if your vendor does not yet support it, you can do funny things with communities to make sure that you are not leaking your upstreams, well, your upstreams routes to other upstreams or to your peers. In general, it should be a document that is not like raising the finger, but instead says like, well, if you want to do X, you should do Y, your network, your rules. Current state, there were not many changes since 1.2.2. The ASPA part needs a bit of an update because I think there was also some changes to ASPA. It references a document from CyberOps, which I have on very high authority from the authors. Might actually get resurrected despite being expired. Me being one of them, sorry. I need to go over the text and align the terminology with at least the descriptive stuff in the next item we're going to discuss, because like, even though the following document is not supposed to be authoritative as well, it might be kind of nice if the drafts are somewhat consistent. And of course, there's general cleanup to do, formulations, minor things, updating references. I hope to find some time up until 124 for that, because many big day job tasks for me are currently done, and I might have some time to do fun stuff, like IETF work. Bringing us to the last document, the terms document. There, the original plan was to have a document that collects terms used in global routing operations. I did have this formulation in, I think, Vancouver. The peering with a peer that is a peer is different from the peering with a peer that is an upstream. It kind of makes sense. To get a little bit of like light in this whole situation, the idea was to just collect the terms we are using or we have been using and are no longer using, and just write that down. You know, like as a thing, like, hey, those weird people in Grow said these weird words. What might that have meant? Not like the documents you see in DNSUP with a similar character, which are actually BCPs and which are prescriptive. And again, the idea is that we in the working group just keep continuously updating this document, especially as our language tends to change fast. Change-wise, since 122, there was a similar amount of changes to this document as there was to the previous draft. Both documents since got adopted, so the adopted version has been submitted, but beyond that, not much. To-do item, definitely revisiting the structure. Shall we cluster the glossary and descriptions in like their own parts, or should we merge that? Abbreviations, I'm German, so I do have a thing for really funny abbreviations. Should that be its own section? Should the explanations then be with the abbreviation? It's all questions where input is really appreciated. There's a couple of missing terms. There's also a couple of tickets in the repository for that. There's also always really a lot of appreciation for pull requests and new tickets, like if you see something that should be changed. And of course, the general cleanup also applies here. So going now to the discussion part. For the first document, working group last call or not, if I was a chair of this group, I would have some concerns to have this discussion given the amount of hands raised when asked how many people read it. So the question might also be, how do we make more people read it? Because that is, I think, somewhat necessary. Thank you.
If I may, as I happen to be the chair, right? What we can start with is a Shepherd write-up to see if the chairs think the state of the document is such that it should progress. After Shepherd write-up, working group last call, yes or no?
So that is basically you have the action item of making the Shepherd write-up, and then
I took the token, so our secretary or co-chair can make a note, produce a Shepherd write-up for BGP OPSEC update.
Wonderful, thank you.
Now, I assume, of course, the document is fine, and then we can do working group last call, which might force some people to read it. Jeff, you have something to say?
Jeff Houston, chair of the DNS directorate. And the DNS also suffers a similar problem of eyeballs on documents and critical eyeballs on documents. And sort of over the last year or so, we've been diligent in trying to say to working group chairs and authors, we're here to help you with your document, not only to help you, but get eyes on it. And you're busy saying, I've only got the last call and that's the only tool. I thought there was some kind of routing directorate. Does it exist? Do they, can you as chairs go to the AD going, these documents now, I want review before working group last call, which I would have thought was perfectly feasible, to actually get some folk who are committed to do this review, who in theory are they're not complete neophytes to routing. They're meant to be folk who know what they're doing. I don't know, I'm not on the directorate, but let me just proffer this as one way forward to get some more eyeballs on it. Thanks.
Yeah. So to summarize, the IETF has directorates. It's a difficult word to pronounce for me. And these are groups of volunteers that will review documents. And this can happen in any stage of the document. But it usually happens at the request of chairs. So I think Jeff is suggesting that we as chairs will click the buttons to request review, which we'll do after the Shepherd, some initial review. But yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Thank you for that.
I would also support this. I had a similar problem with my now RFC in the ACME working group of getting eyes on it and sending it to early review helped prompt people to say you've done this wrong.
Bottom line, the next step is a chair action, not an author action, as far as I got. Awesome. Then we have or another one for this.
Yeah, so just to, Rashad from Equinix, just to add to what Jeff said, I've heard the directorate people say that they don't like getting requests before it's been reviewed substantially from the working group. So you can't just say, I got no comments from my working group, directorate, please do the job of the working group. That's all.
Right. So this is why the chairs should make an initial pass, which would copy paste into the Shepherd review field. But yeah, thank you for that comment.
Yeah. Again, more hands for the informal draft. There's a question how to handle the document. I heard that we are going to try to revive that, so then that question will be resolved. And for the terms one, cluster alphabetically by topic, merge glossary for TLAs or terms, or leave them separate. Those are basically the key questions. And if anyone has opinions on that, that would be highly appreciated.
Job Snyder, speaking as co-author of draft IETF CIDROPS Avoid RPKI State in BHP. The summary of that document is that we have discovered it is disadvantageous for networks to copy the validation state into, say, BGP communities or other transitive attributes in the BGP protocol. Because it means that if you delete a ROA or add one, then there's a little bit of churn in the BGP realm. I think that concept of, hey, try to avoid that is not super controversial. We've tried to capture the underlying reasons of why it is advantageous to avoid state leaking from one realm to another realm. So I will refresh the draft and we'll try and work it through the sausage machine so that you have a document to reference that is in a similar phase as, say, OPSEC inform.
Amazing. I'll get the barbecue ready.
Yeah.
Just to fix your language, it is fine to copy RPKI evaluations into into communities or whatever. It is bad to leak it on eBGP.
Yeah, it's definitely bad on eBGP, and there might be disadvantages in iBGP.
Not necessarily, because your caveat that, well, okay, ROAs might change. Well, okay, the policy that is likely to be used for creating the community will be rerun when the ROA is changed.
It sounds like you're volunteering to read this draft. It may already cover some of what you say.
Kind of. My hope was, yes, that you have done it right and you were just using loose language.
I was
today.
very loose.
So I can assure you that Job is generally a very loose person when it comes to language. So better go back to the draft, carefully read it, and make sure that he was actually using loose language. I really appreciate it as a co-author.
Richard Patterson, Sky. As an operator, I have definitely experienced and been bitten by copying the validation state and signaling it through IPGP when our validator starts flapping and cause lots of pain.
All right, we have 24 seconds, Tobias.
I think the discussion is out of scope and there's no other people at the microphone apart from that discussion. So I just give you this and you give it to the next person.
Okay. Thank you so much for this update. Then we will switch to Prasad Narasimha. I think we got the correct slides ready for you.
All right, thank you.
Be sure to talk into the microphone. Yeah.
So I'll be covering these three drafts on behalf of my co-authors. There are two of these drafts which we presented in the last IETF, that was a V0 version. They focus primarily on improving BMP convergence for certain deployments. And then there's one which talks about a new functionality with purge notification. Okay, this is the first one where we talk about aggregating route monitoring messages. Like most of you know, today there is a peer header for every route one message which is sent out. So if you're monitoring, let's say 1,000 BGP peers, there'll be 1,000 such messages for each of the peers with the route ones. So a quick recap on what we had proposed. So the Aggregated Rodman message was defined as a means to aggregate all these Rodman messages across multiple peers. There's a sample of the how the message format looks like with the common header on the left at the bottom. And then we have expanded that multi-peer header on the right. So if you see, there's a per peer header, and then there is an optional path attributes following it. So this was essentially the format of the aggregated Routman message. The main premise of this was we are going to reduce the number of BMP messages sent. So that in effect reduces the processing time on the box, on the router, and over the wire, and also on the BMP collector. Um, Maybe it's more important for the router because the collectors usually run on very powerful CPUs, which is not the case for a lot of the routers. Uh, so what are the updates to the current version 3? So the last previous version 2 was presented at IETF 120. Then Prasad joined as the co-author a few months back, and then we made the following edits to this draft. One of the first one was to make the path attributes in the multi-peer header optional. So if I go back, the BGP path attributes you see after per peer header, those are made optional. So uh, this gives flexibility to the implementations to avoid any complexity if they're not able to do it, still getting the benefit of aggregation. And then we do allow for multiple aggregated Routman messages. So just like you could have multiple Routman messages, you could have multiple aggregated Routman messages for the same set of prefixes. If the same set of prefixes get updated, you can send multiple of these. And then we have defined mutual exclusion with our good old Routman message type 0. So you can use either of these, not both. And then there is clarification on how this can be used for different reviews in pre, in post, out pre, out post. We've added clarification to that. And then there is also clarification with regards to how this complements the BMP common updates draft, which is for across reviews. This one is for within a review. So I'm going to be talking about that draft next. And then also we added some examples just to make things clear. So that's on version 3, but while in the midst of it, we kind of realized it would make sense to split the draft into two. I'll explain the reasoning for it. So we want to separate the multi-peer header draft into its own draft because we see quite a few generic use cases for the multi-peer header draft. And then that will become like a foundational draft. And then the aggregated Routmon draft, which is the current draft, would simply refer to that and then kind of build on it to use it for Routmon messages. So this way we have flexibility to extend it to other message types. The third draft I'm going to present, I'll show you how that particular draft can make use of the multi-peer header concept as well. And then we have other use cases in mind for future. So, and then thanks to Luke, he sent us some feedback on the version 3. So we're going to also put that in the next version. Okay, that's all on this draft. If you have any questions, I'll wait for a bit. All right. So this is the second one. This is also around optimizing BMP convergence, BGP convergence. So the previous draft talked about how we optimize things within a certain review. This one is talking about how do you optimize things across reviews. So let's say you want to aggregate things across in pre, in post, or out pre, out post. This draft kind of defines how to go about it. Just a quick recap. We had proposed two solutions in the previous ITF. One was to use the flags, and the other one was to use a TLV. Both of them had their own pros and cons. So we got, thanks to the working group members, we got some good feedback on the previous version. So I think one of the suggestions was two options is good for fostering discussion, but we should propose one in the draft, and not to try and squeeze too many things into the peer flags, because in the BMP version 3, there's a very limited space for the peer flags. I think Jeff had a suggestion, maybe in the V4, we could increase the size of the peer flags. And then also to keep in mind the timestamps, because when you aggregate things, maybe you lose timestamps. And then we also had some discussion on the potential use cases for the draft, where it will be applicable and such. So we analyzed all these options, and then we created a beautiful table, and then we shared it with all the working group members, and we had some discussion around it. I'll not go through that in detail, but the main points we tried to sort of contrast between these two options to help us pick which one we should go with was, does this work with V3, V4? Is it using peer flags? Is there ability to aggregate across all four reviews? Though I think practically we may not be looking at aggregating all to four reviews. Maybe it's either in pre, in post, or out pre, out post. But we still wanted that flexibility in case some implementation is able to do it. And then also look at extensibility for timestamps in future, and backward compatibility of the BMP collector itself. Like what happens if these messages are not understood by a BMP collector? What would happen and such? And then applicability of these flags to other message types. So all things considered, we felt method 2, which was to use the common update TLV, was the way to go, because it gave us the flexibility to extend things in future, and then it was not overloading the peer flags, and then it would support uh, aggregation across multiple reviews, which the other option didn't help with. So we decided to go with that. So we have not updated the draft, but this is the plan that we will update it with the chosen method, which is the method 2. And then we will also clarify that the new TLV can be used with either the Routmon message, which is type 0, or the newly proposed aggregated Routmon message, which we showed in the which I showed in the previous draft. And then also address the extensibility to other timestamps. It's pretty easy to do it with this option. And then we'll also investigate the scope to extend this to other message types. Because right now we have proposed it for Routmon, but I think there is some scope to aggregate things for other message types as well. So we will add a section for that in the draft. Okay. Any questions on this? Comments? All right. The last draft. So we started this draft by proposing a way to purge the routes which are in the BMP collector. So the way we had proposed it was by introducing a peer flag in the peer header of the Routmon message. So if that bit is set, and then if you send a MP unreach NLRI with the EOR marker as it's defined in RFC 2858 and 4724, then the collector would interpret it as a purge for that AFI-SAFI for that peer. Okay, so we got a bunch of feedback on this also, thanks to these working group members. Again, it was a similar comment not to try and squeeze things into peer flags. And I think we also got feedback to avoid overloading EOR, which is kind of error prone, which we agree to. I think EOR is error prone. And then also there was a suggestion to include purge reason, which kind of made sense on why we're purging or why the router is asking the collector to purge stuff. And then there was also a feedback to consider using a new message type instead of the peer flags. And then also Jeff had a suggestion to explore things, other things to sort of look at it in a broad sense. So we had three options in front of us, which was either to use peer flags, the new TLV message, or the new message type. Similar to the previous draft, we kind of contrasted it against all these parameters. And then this is what we ended up with. So we decided in the end to expand the problem scope of this draft to define a more generic message to solve multiple such use cases and not limit ourselves to review rip purge. Rip purge will be just one of those use cases. We kind of called it generic event notification message type, gen message type. So our thinking was the rel message type, which is route event logging, will be used for anything route related. This one will be used for anything outside of routes. So this message could be used to notify servers about different operational events, which is beyond the standard route or peer status changes, which is done through peer up, peer downs, and such. So we could use it for any policy triggers, administrative interventions, and such. And this will help us really not to overload the peer down and peer up, which is done quite a bit now. And then also routemon. Like today, our peer header is not specific to routemon. So what ends up happening is for any extension to routemon, we end up adding stuff to the peer header, which is specific to routemon, but then all the message type kind of get impacted. So having something like this, I think, will give us an option to stop doing all of that and have a cleaner way to indicate to the collector about these kind of events. Um, uh, at a very high level, the thought process is we will have an event type, which will be followed with event-specific messages and any actions as required. So as an example, rip purge event will be a specific event type. And then it'll have its own sub-TLV, and then it'll have the content as AFI-SAFI or the reason code, So we can then keep extending this with more sub-TLV types and then add more action and event types. So here, like I was pointing to you guys in the first draft, that we can make use of multiple peer header here. Because there could be events which is not meant for just one peer. It may apply to all the peers. For example, globally, when somebody changes the review mode, which is being monitored on a router, it's not just one peer which is impacted, but it's all peers. So our plan is to extend that multi-peer header draft to support wildcard peers as well. And then this draft can make use of it. So as next steps, we plan to update this draft to be not rip purge event specific, but it'll be a gen event message definition. And then we're going to use, we're going to also mention how the rip purge event will be the first use case of it. That's the plan. So that's all I had. Any questions, comments on this? One feedback I was looking for is maybe from a BMP collector side. I'm thinking more from a router perspective, how it optimizes things for the router, maybe like Luke or anybody else who works on the BMP collector side. What do you think about these encoding changes? Does it make your life complicated? Maybe that's one feedback I'm looking for.
Prasad, Paolo as a contributor. Two points. So one is, so am I right that this GEN message is not defined yet? It's not codified in some text?
No, it is not.
And so I wanted just to say, like, I don't know if you know, we have this REL, the root event logging notification, which is an event-driven kind of message. Maybe, I don't know if it makes sense to look whether there is some synergy there. I don't know, maybe something.
Yeah, so our thinking was REL will be used for anything route specific.
Right.
This will be kind of independent of the routes, something very generic, which is config based, which impacts all peers and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah, it will complement the REL. REL will be more for route events. This will be like generic events.
Fantastic.
In fact, the name we got inspired by route event.
Okay.
So, and then we called it generic events.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll take my other point offline because so that Luke can.
Luc Hendricks, NL Labs. This sounds pretty nice. I like that we move away from the from abusing the flags field there. So I'm really curious to see how you update the draft, and if there's already some text that you can share this week.
Sure.
I'd like to read it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jeff has, you're going to find that you've opened the door to a lot of nice things. So as an example, people have asked for telemetry events of when has my router finished doing reevaluation, import, no export, being able to put other meta events that the protocol does that is otherwise not exposed. This is a good place for that.
Thank you.
Camilo. And of course. course, I cannot find the slides here.
Ready?
I just got an email from the tax office. Honestly, so I'm even more nervous than ever. Okay, so this is Camilo Cardona from NTT, and can I? No, maybe not. Okay, I was thinking of doing the other draft first, but I will do an overview of the draft, first of the draft BMP Young, the Young model. So changes from the previous version. We have new authors. I didn't know that Prasad was here. Hello, nice to meet you. We will deal later with the number of authors. I honestly didn't know there was a limit. Thanks to the new authors, we brought some new ideas, people with knowledge of BMP implementation. So we did several changes in the model. I'm not going to detail them now. Just if you want to give it a read and give opinions, please go ahead. So the biggest change in the draft is that, this is my personal opinion. I think that one of the reasons why we don't have that many IETF models implemented is because they carry a lot of weight. That is, they depend on other IETF models, and this starts to become a bit too much for vendors to implement models. So to try to facilitate that, what we did was to create two auxiliary or satellite, let's say, files or models that have the high dependencies on the BGP model that might be removed in the future and to the TCP model. And within the main module, on the main BMP module, then what we did was to enclose references to the IETF routing policy through an if feature. Please notice that the if feature can also be tricky to implement, so we'll see what we do there later. But we hope with this, it's going to be, let's say, a simpler model to implement. The main model still, let's say, imports some other IETF models, but they are basically for listing resources. So this is the list of interfaces, this is the list of BRFs, this is the list of neighbors, stuff like this. Discussing this with Thomas, we realized that vendors are smart and they know that they can deviate for that if they don't support those IETF modules, and they can start listing stuff with their own models. So we didn't write that, but we know that that can happen. Okay, so this is for my personal health. I'm a bit defensive. The model is indeed a bit complicated. The reason for that is that we are trying to balance the defaults and the flexibility. That is, we want to provide service provider to a way of configuring BMP with just a few lines of code of configuration if you want to have everything, but also to give them the option if you want to do something crazy like, okay, I have 1,000 BRFs, but for this specific BRF, I want for this thing, they can also have that. And doing that, of course, brings complexity. So these are the ideas that the model is basically trying to cope with that. If you have better ideas, please come ahead. But that's basically what we are trying to do. Meta already gave us great feedback. I hope we can get some more feedback in the next week. I think maybe we can wait for that feedback to be implemented, or now already we can start asking for a young doctor. I do not know how that procedure works, asking for a young doctor. So maybe Matt can give us a hint, or it's just an email, then we just write the email and ask for it.
We got to check if your insurance covers young doctor services. No.
Well, or the tax that I paid, yeah.
This is a to-do item for the chairs. We'll figure out how to get that going. I think Matt, are you in the room? Or
he's hiding. I mean,
Matt knows exactly how that works. So we'll get that sorted for you. No worries.
Okay. Oh, well, there was a question comments slide, but well, questions and comments for that one, if anybody has. Okay. So better, because we have more time for this one, which is the long one. Okay, this is the state for the path status draft, or path marking, as we call it, version 3. So as an overview, what this draft tries to do is it proposes adding a TLB for including path status in a BMP update. Those are the basic path status that we are defining right now.
And it has a nice optional reason field so that you can give more detail if you want. It's optional, of course. Difference from the previous version of the draft, we added a bit more notes in the implementation. We added this big section of churn that Jeff recommended. So what happens? You add more state, you add more metadata to the path. And if that metadata, which is not usually there, changes, then you will have bigger churn that we are normal vanilla BMP. We have some ideas on how to deal with that. Sometimes we are okay dealing with that for the benefits that they provide, but maybe it's something that we can discuss further in the future. I'm not going to discuss that today. I'm going to do something else. So, but it's an interesting topic, honestly. Other security considerations and some editorials. So what I do want to do today, which I normally don't do, is to actually go in detail through some use cases. So on these conversations on the mailing list, we realized that maybe we should be more verbose on what are we trying to solve. So this specific TLB actually is good for many things. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go, let's say, through a bit shortly, through the life of a BMP packet through a router, in a very high level, and tell you why, at least in our use cases for operators, marking those paths for the status they have can be useful for us. Before I do it, I do want to say that we do have counters already for that. So we can use, I know, the VPS statistics and models, CLI, SNMP, to get counters for, I know, invalid, 3RS withdraw, wherever accepted routes, stuff like that. But that's not enough. I do reference you to this draft IETF MPI terminology to see the difference between monitoring observability, which is what we're trying to aim. The whole NMOP group is basically about that. So I invite you to go there and see why we need more data for the different prefixes to try to find better anomalies, to try to start evaluating scenarios before they happen. So we need basically more information. Okay, so first of all, when a BGP packet arrives to the router, this is for the sake of completeness. They can be malformed. This is really not related to this draft. I just put it here for completeness because they should not be included in the road monitoring, I believe. If we want them, we can go for road mirroring. But if we had, having that data can be interesting because these things should not happen. We know that. I'm not going to go deeper into that. If the packet is let's say well formed, then it can happen that it's invalid. So this thing of invalid routes, I thought it was not well defined, but it's actually in plenty RFCs already. So let's say it's more or less defined. And the literature examples of those are when paths have unreachable next hop or IS loops. Why do we need that? Okay, normally, no network architecture in the world will like to have a path that is invalid. So when that's happening is because something is wrong, normally. So identifying those cases, of course, can be good for troubleshooting, policy verification, and all of that. So that's good information that we can use to keep our networks, let's say, more tidy. But for details on the VIP path marking, they should come from the attribute in pre, because in the post there are no filter routes. And we just mark them as invalid. And if you want to know the reason, then you have to add the reasonable option codes. That's the status right now for the draft. If the paths are fine, they're not invalid, then they go through the policy, the inbound policy, and they can get filtered. Knowing whether a path is filtered or not can be useful depending on the networks, how the network policy is. Here we have very different flavors. For some networks, having routes that are filtered is fine. For some others, it's also a sign that something is wrong. So, that's information that can be good, again, for troubleshooting, policy verification, and so on. It will be very nice, of course, to know why the path is policy is filtered, but that goes beyond complexity. For instance, it can be filtered because of RPKI. I don't know. But I'm not saying that this is how we want to monitor that. I'm saying that the TLB is general enough to be able to cope with those cases if we need to. If the paths are not filtered, then they are accepted. We can get those paths already on the HRV post, but we could also get them from the pre directly if the paths were marked. So with just one feed, we're getting everything. So that's a win-win for everybody. Well, maybe it's not for others. Okay, so we have all the paths in the RIP, and they follow the, I don't know, it's called the second path of the BGP, the best path decision process. And I will assume that from the Lord RIP, you get all paths. A BMP station will get all paths. And then knowing what type of where in that best path and in this best path algorithm they are can be useful for different reasons. So let's say that you have some applications that correlate traffic with BGP data. They will need to know the paths that actually are used for forwarding. I'm going to say PMSUCT is something is an app that needs that, for instance. So marking from all the paths, the ones that are primary, the ones that are used for forwarding, that is just important for that sort of application. And those are applications that calculate network traffic matrices and things like that. So they do calculations with traffic. Specifically differentiating between best and primary can be probably good for policing or something like that, but basically knowing primary is what we have seen is our main focus. And also for those or different types of applications that do what-if analysis. What-if analysis are these analyses that network operators do frequently, which is, hey, what happens if this link fails? When we have BGP on the game there, it's complicated because running the BGP decision process is very hard. It might not be deterministic. But if we know which paths are already a backup because the router calculates them, we are saving ourselves a lot of trouble, and tools that do what-if analysis can quickly, for some scenarios, tell you already what can happen with some traffic if paths fail. So that's why marking backup is one of the, I know, killer features or killer capabilities, now they're called, for this draft. Stuff like best external can also be useful for those type of what if scenario cases in a bit more complex scenarios. And finally, non-install and unselected. We actually know for implementations that they don't mark paths as invalid. They bring them until this point and they mark them as non-install. In that case, that will be useful for that. And stateless on press, again, these things should not really happen. So knowing when they happen is good information so we can act. I'm not going to repeat the story for us review out. I only have 2 minutes, but it's the same road. I don't know who is implementing a review out, by the way, but if it was implemented and if you have a policy in which you should not filter, we filter all the time in network, so we are not going to look for that. But if that's your policies that you should not filter, then knowing that something is filtered can be bad, and the same happens with announced prefixes. Okay, that's it. It's already too long, so I just wanted to say that. Comments and questions, please. We welcome them and thank you.
Hi, it's Shu Wang from Zhongguancun Laboratory. I just have a quick question. I've read your earlier version of this draft, and there's the RPK invalids in the list of the past type. And I noticed that in this draft, it is no longer here. And so I'm wondering the reason.
Yeah, honestly, I think there's work, like independent work working on RPKI, and we didn't want to get into that. But the main reason is that many times RPKI is just one of the terms of a policy. And it might be too complicated for this first version of a draft to already ask a vendor, okay, mark it when RPKI is invalid. It might be complicated. So we just remove it. We just didn't want to have that discussion here. But we do have it in mind if this is a mechanism that can help that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Camilo. This is Prasad from Cisco. First of all, I want to say this is very helpful. Thanks for adding the use cases. Because from our side where we have to implement this, I think it does impact the convergence because you're increasing, like you said, the churn. There's more chatter, and then there is less possibility of coalescing things like we do in BGP because now you're splitting everything. I think we have to be very mindful of this when deploying this because especially when it is done at scale, it can really increase the impact on the router. So maybe that could go into some implementation notes section or such.
Yeah, we try to expose that in the churn section. The churn section could have a bit more work. Jeff did have, for instance, an idea, which is just an idea. I like it. I don't know how complicated it is, that maybe the implementator can decide to turn the feature on later on when before it's, say convergence or not is hard in BGP because some stuff does never converge, but maybe we can find we can leave to the vendor to find the definition and turn it on and off. What we did in the draft was to be very explicit, to differentiate explicitly when something is marked because it's being marked. Wait, when there's no marking, you actually have to be explicit that there's no marking so that an implementation can be free of deciding when to actually add the TLB, and when the TLB is not there is because the implementation does not have that information, for instance. I don't know. I mean, those are trying to cope with that. I mean, sometimes a none is better than to have something, like to have garbage, let's say. Oh, by the way, I want to say something here. At least in the use case, well, okay, maybe Thomas has other ideas, but at least initially, well, okay, entity here had, we don't want to have this at the millisecond level. I mean, we want to analyze this on the things that are more or less stable. So, I mean, we're not looking this every 5 seconds. We're looking at things that are stable. So that's why putting these markings after something converges makes them, and that can be, we can say 10 minutes, we can say 20 minutes, we can say 3 hours. What we care is more about in a stable state. These are the markings.
Thank you, Camilo. We have really to switch to the next presentation. Thank you. Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Dutch, so this is high enough for me. So, Yang data model for BGP communities, and currently at version 6. So quick recap, the idea is if you're an ISP, you have your BGP communities with your local significance, and you want to publish to the world what you're actually trying to describe in these communities. So you can do that in XML, JSON, and CBOR, and we have a Yang model to verify this. And then on the parser side, if you see a BGP community on the wire, you can use this to actually see what it means and display that to a user, for example. So the latest changes in version 6, I moved all of the data elements to inside the Yang model, to the descriptions. So this removes 6 pages for the draft. So if you want to read it, it's less work. I expanded the security section based on draft netmod RFC 8407 bis. This is Yang guidelines for authors of documents with Yang models. Then I made some changes based on a Yang doctor's review that Paolo requested for me. And I added support for hidden fields, which I will go into in a bit. So a short thing about how the model changed. So in the first drafts, we had many strings, free-form strings. Those have mostly been replaced with defined types, such as URLs and email address, and some types specific to the draft, where I've added some restrictions. Then some of the attributes have changed names based on the Yang doctor's review. So using dashes and using singular names. And then finally, I've changed the model to be read-only. Since this is a publishing-only draft, this is not a configuration model. It's changed to read-only. So here's an example of the current format. On the left, we have a JSON definition of a BGP community for a ASN-based local export from RFC 8195. So we have a global admin field, and inside the local data part, we have a field we call function, which translates to ASN no export. And then in the second local data part, we have an ASN. So on the right, we have what we see on the wire, which is a community 64497, then a 4, then 64498. And that translates then in the parser to show that this is an ASN no export community, and the ASN this applies to is 64498. Second example, a little bit more complex, is for RFC 4384, which is an RFC for communities for data collection. So here we have an extended BGP community. The first field is a reserved field, which we expect to be all zeros. Here, this field does not have a description, so it will not be shown in the right by the parser. This is what I meant by the hidden field earlier. Then we have a region, whether this is a satellite link or not, and the country. So again, on the right side, we have the output based on the last part of the community, the local admin side is 4338. In binary, that translates to the fields on the left, and you get the output. This is a community that is signifying region Oceania, not a satellite, and country is Fiji. So we have a few implementations. First, on the publishing side, RIPE NCC has an implementation for two ASNs, 25152 and 19700. And that is RK root and authoritative DNS ASNs. And then on the parser side, the NLNOC looking glass at lg.ring.nlnoc.net has the output that you see on the screen. So at the bottom, you see some communities that are tagged to RIPE NCC routes, and it shows you the meaning of these communities. So that's the current status, and I would like to have some comments. And one of my questions is if this is ready for working group last call, or if there are further things to be done about this.
Maria.
Maria, speaking as somebody who is probably going once in the future to implement probably the BGP Young or something like that. There is a specification of a format of the BGP communities, extended communities, large communities, and so on in this document. And in the BGP Young draft, which is there for like 20 years, there is another specification, which is, if I remember correctly, by the way, wrong, but that's another topic. But my question is, the BGP Young would probably like to at least recycle these communities, and it doesn't look so much like reusable here. What do you think about this?
I'm curious to hear what is not reusable about it.
So Jeff, as the person who does the BGP Yang, this is not in conflict. Yang allows you to add multiple attributes onto things. So one of the things that can happen, and this might be a useful modeling exercise if you think you're done enough. I had promised you time to review on things, and you see how exactly well I've done on that. So you'll get some after the fact. I'm thrilled with how far this has gone. It should be a fairly easy modeling exercise to put together an augmentation module against both the IETF BGP model and also the OpenConfig one. So you can take an individual community in the canonicalized format for that Yang module and have these things as annotations, which is exactly what you'd want to have for a CLI.
Okay, I will contact you privately to see if we can work on that.
Hello, Q. This is not really a question about the content of this draft, more the next step. I couldn't see anything about discovery. What's the thought on this?
So currently,
or like how they're published and where we find those.
yeah. So currently, for the existing implementation, we just throw it on the web page,
Which is fine.
Which is usable. One idea that that the OpenAI are throwing around is putting this in the RPKI.
Yes, more things in RPI. You're welcome to disagree.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And now, Luke.
I'm starting to think if we order the speakers by length, then we have less microphone adjustments.
So I thought about this, but you have to bin us, I think, right? Because otherwise you still have to adjust the microphone slightly every.
Yeah.
But this is perfect. Martin, where are you? Thank you.
Take it off.
Yeah, I will. Shall I try to make up for some time? Because there's actually presentations at the end of the session that I want to see. So let's go. This is an update on the BMP offline draft, which is titled BMP State Summaries. Does the clicker work?
No,
yes, no, it does. Thank you. There's no update to the document itself, text-wise, between Bangkok and here. We were sent away from Bangkok with the homework assignment of please look into route refresh, because it seems that what you're doing is sort of a route refresh, but then with some extra shenanigans, which makes things extra hard for us. This was a comment basically coming from the vendor side of things. So I will present on that. So just a very quick recap of what this is about. BGP and BMP sessions are typically long-lived, so whenever you have to tune in a BMP session that has been going on for a while, you might miss out on the start, which contains all the information that you need to make sense of what comes after. This draft tries to tackle that by defining something we call a state summary. You can think of it as a snapshot as well, which you then can use, for example, to store a self-contained time-binned bunch of BMP messages to disk. This is what a visualization of that looks like. We have the green peer up notifications as we know them today. We have the blue route monitoring messages as we know them today. And we tie them together with a TLV containing a summary ID. So they're all the same value for the things that you want to group together. And they're preceded by a new message type, a summary summary message, and that contains additional metadata describing this summary or this snapshot, if you will. So, as I said, our homework was look into route refresh because it looks an awful lot like that. That's what we did. And of course, keeping in the back of our heads that we would like to keep the flexibility that our state summary approach had, right? Now, I assume that most of you are somewhat familiar with route refresh, so I will actually jump over this and then this. This is all text that you can read and understand, and then we get to a thing with some colors, because we know that green is you know good, and then red is bad, and then orange is So this is the conclusion, and because the conclusion is actually rather simple. Unfortunately, because with the route refresh, we could sync the contents of the RIP, right? But for the summary, the snapshot, we would also like the session information, and that's not part of the route refresh, and that somewhat, you know, defeats the whole thing. And the other important colored cell in this, I think, is in the expensive row, if you will, for route refresh. Sure, it might be a bit less expensive than what we proposed, but I think it's still not cheap enough for vendors to be like, oh yes, please let me implement this, right? So conclusions from our side here. This whole lack of session info is kind of a deal breaker. In addition to that, it's less flexible, and it's still not cheap enough, I guess, to to make the vendors happy. So we think it's not worth going that route. So what we want to do with the draft is be explicit that everything is still in protocol, but is very much optional. So while we do have the option, if you want to do this from the exporter, which was one comment that was made in Dublin when the 0.0 was presented, it is still possible, but we will switch in terms of we will move the narrative to, let's say, the station, the collector, and downstream from there, right? Because we also realize that we're trying maybe to solve a problem between the exporter, so the router, and the collector that isn't really there per se, right? So we'll focus on challenges that, as I mentioned earlier, try to store this in self-contained time-binned snapshots, or things like redistribution on message buses, so stuff that happens at or beyond the station. So when you say self-contained time-binned snapshots, you think, that sounds a lot like MRT. Yes, so I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we will revive Draft Battery Grow MRT BMP, which has been still for, I'm going to guess, a couple of years. It was held up because reasons that are likely to be fixed with BMP v4. So this is perhaps good timing to start looking at that again. And if you have any inputs, so regardless whether that relates to the BMP offline draft or something completely else, please reach out to either Colin or me. What else is there? Yeah, so are our feelings correct? And should we ditch the whole route refresh ID and with that indeed switch the narrative and move away from the exporter? As I said, we feel it's the right way forward. If somebody disagrees, we would love to hear that at this stage. If not, then for the third version of this draft, we'll work on more of the technical details, which DLVs, message formats, examples, what do we do with the end of summary, and we'll also start to work out some specific scenarios. And a thank you to Rashad, where are you, for already providing input there and kickstarting this thing. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions, comments? Prasad.
Hi, Prasad here. Luke, I think from a router perspective, it's still okay to send peer summaries if you see the need for it. That is not expensive. So just to differentiate the two, there is route refreshes, which is route information, and then there is peer summaries. Those are the two main things we wanted. It's very expensive to send route refreshes periodically to the collector, but I think it's okay to send the peer summaries because that's not expensive. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, so so if we use route refreshes, then we can leverage existing route refresh mechanisms, which is already there for BGP. So it makes it a bit easier for the vendors to implement it, maybe compared to a completely new encoding. But nevertheless, whatever is route related, if you have to send the whole table, it is expensive.
Thank you.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
this was so this is Paolo from NTT. I wanted to provide just two quick updates. Actually, the second update is some questions. So first, the BMP v4, the TLV draft. No. Technical problem. Yeah. So, so essentially a couple of updates about the BMPv4 TLV draft. So we reworked once again the stateless parsing TLV thanks to the input from Maxence. Should I summarize what we did is that like we had the first version, we were choosy and picky in you know the let's say capabilities we wanted to get in the TLV in the root monitoring message. Then we had an intermediate phase where we were saying, okay, not all of the information is encoded correctly over there. And then Maxence came and said, yeah, but this is still not correct because not all the capabilities are per AFI-SAFI and things like that. So the structure was not quite correct. So what we went was for like raw encoding of the capabilities like they are in the BGP open. They should just go in the root monitoring message. By not being choosy and picky, essentially, like we will use a little bit more space, but in the end, I mean, it's like in every root monitoring message, you have everything for sure in order to parse the BGP PDU without going back to the PRAP. There is just a sentence about timestamp being mandatory. This is a conversation we had at the last session about the fact that it's very unpleasant that you know, a monitoring protocol may have the possibility not to travel any timestamp at all. And we define the code points for the new registry that is being created, because before it was all TBD, and you know, that was actually my mistake. I didn't know I had the power creating a new registry to assign the code points. So finally, I did. And if you remember from the last session, we had like, oh, do we have all the timestamps we need and things like that? And so I started, you know, coding the, you know, XML for the draft, like, okay, timestamp TLV. And while I was doing that, I mean, I received an email from Maxence. He's young, he has longer finger, he's taller. So he said, I already did it, right? And I did it even much more than that. So like, let's park this point for 1 second. Maxence or Pierre will present later about this new draft. So maybe we can see whether, you know, this still makes sense. So this is about the TLV draft. I don't know if there is any questions. I think we are in really no drama mode at this point. Okay. So the second one is the EBIT, right? EBIT, we can have a little bit of drama depending. Let's see how it goes. So the reality is that, like, so let's remember, you know, what is the EBIT? The EBIT is that, like, we allow, you know, for the enterprise bit, so people to encode the proprietary information in the TLVs, okay? So not IANA governed, but like per vendor basis. There has been really no changes. The draft expired yesterday. I mean, I have just in the queue to, you know, update the early IANA review. So, but there is an underlying question. So our lovely, you know, AD, Med, the last time he proposed to absorb this document into the TLV draft, saying this is, you know, just a small draft. Made also some technical, you know, observation. They were all handled, but this was the only non-technical one. Now, we know that any single word that we add to a draft, I mean, may, you know, complicate things and make the whole story longer, right? And we are in kind of some pressure to get a BMP version 4 out of the doors because we have use cases, because we have other drafts that are, depending on that, because there are implementations from vendor, from collectors and things like that. So what we don't want is that we absorb something into that draft and then somehow we have still conversations and then we stall it, right? It's a risk. So my question to the audience, if anybody has any opinion, is that whether we should absorb EBIT into the TLV draft or whether we are good like we are. My personal opinion as a contributor is that we should leave things as they are because I am risk adverse. And so essentially I would, just avoid to do this transition. But I'm totally open to opinions. And if the prevailing opinion is to, absorb it, then we are just going to do it. So this is it for me. Any opinions? Huh? Yeah, please. I really wanted to hear from Jeff, from Thomas.
Quick one. So I like to keep it separate because of the risk. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff Oz, I'd prefer to merge them. So the case of if you had a ton of running code, I would agree with you. It's worth keeping them separate. I think things are probably so early on that since your use case is sort of being copied from IPFix and similar things where it's already in TLVs, carry that pattern forward.
Okay. So that's the most unpleasant outcome we have at I. Prasad, tell us something. I mean, you are also an implementer. I mean, I don't know.
I'm neutral. I'm okay either ways.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay. Well, then, I don't know.
We have a new tool in Meet Echo to
Fantastic.
Do a show of
Please.
hands. So, vote for Estonia or Denmark in Eurovision Song Festival. Merge or not merge?
But wait, it's not correctly posted. Like merge or separate. What is yes and what is no? Right? Hey.
Okay.
Hey guys,
What is the question I should be putting in?
Hey guys, they picked me as a co-chair for a reason. Shall we merge the documents?
Shall we merge EBIT and TLV? I am so glad you're paying attention.
I think we need to call it Martin from Eurovision to say we have a secure vote.
How long do we wait until we get the correct answer?
I think numbers are not increasing anymore, so probably.
Okay.
No, they are still increasing, but okay.
So based on this, I would encourage the authors to research a merge, prep the document. If you somehow in this process discover the readability or clarity of either aspect really deteriorates, then that would be an argument to continue with separation of concerns.
Okay.
But maybe if you actually try to merge it, you're like, oh, this actually shortens things.
Yeah. And I would say we can always split them again, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
that's
Fantastic.
Yeah. And we can do another vote. Yeah.
No,
All right. Thank you, Paolo. Then I would like to invite Shuhe Wang to talk about RPKI monitoring requirements. Let me pull up the slides. That should go. Share slides.
Requirements confirm. Okay. So here you go. Okay. Am I ready to go?
You are ready, good to go.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Shuhe Wang from Zhongguancun Laboratory, and I'll talk about requirements for monitoring RPK-related processes on routers using BMP.
So let me make some more clicks.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. It
Okay.
should work now.
Okay. So I actually had talked about this in the last talk, but due to the time limit, I only introduced what kinds of RPK-related information could be monitored on the router and why they are important to monitor. For today's talk, I want to further clarify the systematic requirements and give some suggestions on how to extend the current BMP messages to support monitoring RPK. So let's first take a brief recap. So for the whole RPK life cycles on the router, from pre-validation to validation and post-validation, we have divided all the RPK-related processes on the router into 4 key stages, namely download RPK objects, configure RPK-related policy, execute route validation, and route actions based on validations. To support monitoring these stages in BMP, a direct, maybe similarly direct solution is to raise new message type for each of these stages. But this may require a somewhat huge modification or incremental change to the existing BMP messages. So, but well, here I want to talk about another direction, which is to just make use of the existing BMP message type and only add slightest modification. Since my time in this talk is very limited, I only talk about the stage 2 and stage 3. So stage 2 is to report the change in RPK-related policy configurations. And for this stage, for each pair, the policy configuration may be different for different pairs. For example, for AS-pass verification, the validation may be different for customers and providers. So we can just extend the pair up notification message and add additional group of information TLVs to the pair up notification messages to include all the monitored fields. And for stage 3, the RPK-related route validation, there are 2 folds to monitor. The statistical summaries of validation outcomes and the validation state of each route, along with the specific reason for that state. And for the first one, we can extend the statistical report messages and extend the BMP's static types for the different statics. And for the second, we can extend the route monitoring messages and also extend the TLVs to help report all these fields. And finally, the transmission security in the to support RPK also need to be concerned because both RPK-related data and RPK-related policy needs to be contact and correct after transmission. So the BMP should be additionally required to use safe transmission protocol and end-to-end data validation. Actually, that's the main content I want to share, and I want to leave time for the audience comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking just as working group participant, I think you're touching upon interesting work, and I think it is fruitful to pursue what can be done in this space because you're spot on that RPKI inputs influence what happens in the BGP machinery and enhanced monitoring capabilities might be useful. So yeah, take this as encouragement.
Okay, thank you.
So Xiang Liu from Pongsun Laboratory, and I think this is a very interesting topic. And so I just have one question and one recommendation. So have you ever considered that involve the SLUM into the into your the stuff that you want to monitor from the BGP routers?
Actually, I think Slum is, I think these requirements is just focused on the routers level. And
Yeah. I mean, as you just mentioned that you want to monitor the validation rules of the BGP routers, right? So I mean, Slurm is a mechanism that enables the local manager of the BGP routers that to override the validation rules of VRPs, and I guess it's better to monitor the enablement of Slurm and how the Slurm files is specified, and whether the VRPs are overridden by some files, and something like that in your design.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll think about it. Thank you.
Jeff, as I put this into chat, so this is for the room as well. There is also work in CyberOps for doing an RPKI Yang module. Some of the state that you're doing here has good overlap. My recommendation, regardless of who does the work anywhere, is that Grow for BMP and the streaming telemetry for Yang, wherever that work lands, should stay in harmony with each other.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tim Ruithels, Ripe NCC. I wanted to mention a potential use case that I see for monitoring this stuff is perhaps in the space of what if you're doing an announcement that you actually don't allow by your own ROAS. Might be useful to inform you that you need to fix something. So there may be things in that space that could be interesting to look at.
All right, thank you so much. Then we go to our last presentation of the day. Pierre-François. This is the clicker. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to press buttons. Start clicker.
Oh, okay.
I think it might work.
You're sharing, right?
Is it not working? Let me press more buttons.
I think we have first to remove the thing.
Rest assured, we're going to press buttons until the slide deck shows.
Executive
There we go.
summary, we need more TLVs.
Take it away.
Yeah. So, hi everyone, Pierre-François. This is joint to work with Maxence. 3 new TLVs proposed to you for discussion. It does not the usual. Yeah, cool. So, I'll try to make it fast. Discuss why we think we need those TLVs, and then quickly go over them. We think we need a new timestamp TLV because the current field for the timestamp is overloaded, not in the specification, but in the implementation, and for good reason, we think. So the specs is rather clear, but in the implementation, due to some complexities sometimes to get those timestamps, we get either nothing, although the implementation could give us something that could be meaningful for the operator as a second resource when the actual one in the spec is not right. Or worse, in some implementation, when they cannot provide what is in the spec, they give something else. Like, for example, I cannot tell you when I install the route in my log crypt. So instead, in the timestamp, I'm telling you when I'm exporting that message to you, which is not quite unfortunate. Also, for anything else than a route monitoring message, we have a timestamp there, but there is no definition of it. So what we suggest to do is to have a TLV with a clear meaning for the timestamp and giving the opportunity to the vendor that define which one is they're wanting to support or not. And well, that's roughly it. And if they want to support multiple of them, they can give us multiple of them. We actually have already 5 of them in the list, and we would like to add more of them already if you want to take this as a further one. Yeah, the flags, we've heard about them already. We're running out. There was supposedly smart trick to redefine the flag space as a function of peer type, which led to some misalignment of some flags. Yeah. Filtered flag for some reason is deprecated at the IANA, and I would like this to be defined why. We know it's deprecated, but we don't know why. So we're getting a little confused, and so we would like to get some simplicity there. So let's add a TLV. So we booked the last, well, one of the last flags, which is called the extended flags flag. And that's basically has the meaning of telling us there are more flags to come in a TLV, ignore the current one in the fields, and follow the ones that we are going to define in the TLV, basically. And now the last one, sequence number. So we want to have a sequence number in our messages. It's not, yeah. First reason is, as per our current understanding of how BMP over QUIC may work, we may need sequence numbers because if, well, order matters on BMP, order of the messages matters. And so if we have those messages flying to us in different channels, that order is lost. And so we may simply be not functioning at all. So we think it's needed for BMP over QUIC if we understood the spec correctly. And timestamp will not work for all the reasons I listed above, leading to the requirement to have a timestamp TLV. And also for the collector, it makes the life much easier to have that sequence number because we can refer to them for, like, you know, flushing all data up to some, restarting some process up to some sequence, well, part of the stream. And that's what I made it in for. So questions, opinions?
3 people jumped in the room, so yeah, let's go through this.
Very quick. Jeff has, so for your sequence, what I strongly recommend is add to your procedure that a given destination is never sent over more than one stream. You know, you can certainly have different applications doing different things over the streams for a different context, but as long as you keep it to the same stream, you're keeping the BGP stateful property you're looking for.
We disagree, but I think it's because we need more clarity on BMP over QUIC.
Hi, this is Prasad. So I had a comment on the timestamp TLV. Just to let you know, on the router side, if you define this many different timestamps, it means that we will have to burn that much memory for every path. So you have to be mindful of that. And then the burning happens even when BMP as a feature is not enabled on the router. So people who are not using BMP also will see the impact of it, because there are some things wherein, you know, you want to know when the route was received, so BMP may not be enabled then. So
yeah,
so this will increase the memory consumed and maybe the scalability of the routers.
We totally agree with you. What I would like is that if you cannot support one of these, you use another one or you support none of them, but vendors stop sending us timestamps that do not mean what they are meaning in the RFC. And that's why we want to give you the freedom to choose what you can support and give us what you actually mean with the type that you have in that timestamp. So that's why what you said is a better explanation of what I need this than what I try to give. So thanks. Yeah, totally agree with you.
Okay. And then could you also clarify what's the granularity you look at, like how much?
We kept the same as the previous one, so we have seconds and microseconds, but leave it in the doc what it actually means for the microseconds. I don't want to specify in there what is the granularity, but we wrote 2 microseconds in the spec.
Okay, thank you.
Luc Hendricks, NLNet Labs. We already talked a bit about this out of band, so this is more for the room. I think I have a problem with the flags TLV, moving flags to a TLV, because we actually use the flags as they are defined today to differentiate between multiple views coming from the exporter, right? And currently this is in a nice and convenient spot because it's right beside all the other things that we use to differentiate in the prepare header, right? So we can just take the entire chunk, it's at a static offset, that's great. Moving it to a TLV will not make that impossible, but it will make that harder. So I'm curious to whether we are the only ones relying on that thing, and it also brings up a second question, which I guess is for later on. But the way we use it, those flags, the definition of the flags as we know them today, indeed differentiate between views. And some of the flags that we discussed, for example, the purge flag, which will then maybe not happen, would not fit into that category, right? So I would actually like to learn from people that were working on BMP before me, whether that's intentional, this possibility to actually differentiate between views when defining the flags, or whether this is a coincidence that we should not actually rely on, if that makes sense. So I do like the timestamps, by the way, but you do that.
So I'm not sure if you're the only one. You're the only one I know of. Okay. So, which I understand it could be a problem for you. I let the archaeologists figure out why we went there. Okay. So the problem you have actually is that the way we define that flag is that one should ignore the flags, the original field of the flags when the X bit is set, which means that vendors may stop setting them correctly, and you're in trouble if they do that. Okay? A deal we could make would be to say that when you set it, you leave the first part as they are, and so you're going to survive for a while. I would advise, to be completely honest with you, I would like BMP v5 maybe to be full TLVs, etc. And so I would advise to start thinking about phasing this approach out. But temporarily, I would be okay to do that. For us, it does not matter. Okay. So if you absolutely need this and you can you convince everyone, for us, we don't care. If you want us to mandate that we set the flags where they are right now, as we've been doing, and so we change the wording, fine for you. And I see possibility.
Yeah, I'm sure we can, figure out something that will work. We should talk more offline. And just to add, at the end of the day, I still think we should just bump the size of the flag field in V4. But that's maybe out of scope for this discussion. Might have been a better comment at one of Paulo's presentations. But
fine.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thank you.
Paolo Lucente, I have a comment as a contributor. Super quick. This is very interesting work, of course. I should, yes. Paolo Lucente as a contributor. So I think this is very interesting work. We should see how much comments we receive and things like that, because some of this, can even belong to the TLV draft, like the timestamp. It is something that could go in BMP version 4. But comparing to what I was saying before about the EBIT, we should not stall BMP version 4. So I will be very interested in the forthcoming meetings to see how much roadblocks and stuff we hit on this stuff. If things go smooth, maybe we can consider to absorb these TLVs and make one big, beautiful document. Or let's say we leave it separate.
From an academic standpoint, I would think timestamp, for example, should go in there, right? Because it would be ideal, and we're going to get into trouble. But I would be really sad if, due to this, we lose. I'm getting impatient on the TLV draft, right? And so I don't want to be, with Maxence, responsible of any form of delaying.
Totally. We agree. We agree. Thank you.
Job Snyders as a contributor. On the timestamp TLV, I would recommend using a 64-bit wide field for seconds. and a long for nanoseconds. This way it aligns with struct time spec, and yeah, this might make it a little bit
By
more.
me, I would let the vendors state their opinion, and
I think
on
most
our
operating
on our
systems.
on our side, it does not matter much, so I would let the vendors decide what they prefer, and I'm okay with
I just think this is common among many operating systems. And then the second comment is in relationship to the sequence numbers, also a comment on field sizing. If the sequence number will ever roll over, so if rollovers are challenging, make it 20 octets, because then you have until the end of time.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't have a specific recommendation, but think it through. Like, is it really large enough?
Maxence said 4, I said 8, and we knew it would come.
I say 20. Okay.
Whatever.
But maybe you make a rollover mechanism, and then it can be short. I don't know, but yeah.
We could make a field and ask for field to tell us how many messages in a typical session before it gets reset, and make a scientific
that'd be good.
approach
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
This if you want.
Yeah.
4 is too little in my opinion.
All right, that was it from my side.
Thanks for the feedback. It's cool.
Thank you. All right. Our last presentation, unfortunately, the presenter had to bow due to a last-minute scheduling conflict. So everybody that wanted to present today was able to present, and I'm very happy with that. See you in Montreal, I think. Yep. IETF 124. Yep. Montreal's in a different country, so book flights accordingly. Thank you all. Bye. Yeah.